Welcome to Let's Take a Walk, brought to you by the Feld Group Institute. Organizations rarely behave the way they look on paper. Work moves in unexpected paths, teams shift their focus, and leaders often discover that visibility is far more elusive than structure. In today's episode, Jesson and Hemerson Paes help us slow down and see the motion inside our organizations, including the patterns, the disconnects, and the possibilities that emerge when we stop assuming and start observing. It's a conversation about clarity, alignment, and the kind of leadership that creates space for people to do their best work. Here's JR.
Charlie and I and some of the affiliates have been spent a lot of time over the last, Charlie, 6 months, really starting to think through some of the implications, both of what we're seeing in our client work, kind of the high speed, over volunteered leadership tier of IT organizations, and beginning to think through also aspect or kind of some of the impact that developments in artificial intelligence are going to have on the operating of our organization. And as a side effect of some of the work that I've been doing over the last couple of years, I've had an opportunity to become more connected to a community of thinkers that are focused on understanding organizational networks and using organizational networks as a component of adaptability and agility. And one of the key thinkers in that space is my guest today, Hermson Paes, who is with Roche, and I think Hemerson based in Basel. So thank you for being on at this hour. And what I was hoping to do is to first, walk us through some of where our heads are at in terms of this topic, and then hear from Hemerson, who's really been through an implementation process around something called adaptive teams networks, and really offer this as kind of a way of thinking now about how we might incorporate new thinking, new capabilities into the way we operate our shops, as well as beginning now to think over the horizon about how AI is gonna impact all of this. So with that, I think, Charlie, we thought it would be great for you to just start with your discussion about kind of where we're at right now, right? Just kind of all the changes that have been happening.
Yeah, I think, those of you that know me, I've been around a while, so, I've kind of seen the industrial era move into the IT era in the 60s when I began with IBM. And, the IBM era was a big transformation of business in that it was the first time companies were able to centralize and functionalize. Before that, every company was regional or local in nature. And when they centralized and functionalized, we got into functional excellence and continuing to improve and optimize each function in a company. Right? And as we got into the distributed era during that mainframe time frame, we kind of switched a little bit to a business process view of how companies work. And that's when we started connecting functional systems and functional processes to larger grained company-wide processes. So order to cash, but that's when we began to do it one thing at a time and building, kind of tight coupling and messaging across, which built the hairball, frankly, right, during that 30 years of the mainframe. As we got into the second era of my career and of the IT era, things began to change in that business models began to move to be global, not international. We were just replicating functional excellence country to country, but it began to go east-west, and we became global, and we built more hairball in a lot of cases, connecting supply chains around the globe, not just within our companies, but within the ecosystem and companies that didn't do it went away, right? And as we got into this next era, which is the AI era, so kind of mainframe, distributed, era one, internet, mobility, era two, and now we're in this third era. A couple of things are really showing up in that the predictability of global, local, national, it's everything, everywhere, every time, right? And it's constantly changing. And it started to really trigger when COVID hit and people accelerated. Digital didn't have, this last year, it didn't have time to gestate much. It just kind of happened, right? As everybody went to Zoom, as everybody started working. And now with the pullback on, people realizing that you can't buy a toaster oven or a car or anything if one country is closed for business for whatever reason. People's supply chains are becoming more dynamic. Things are becoming more dynamic as we go. And, those 3 eras were very distinct, but the first era kind of ran 30 years. The second era of the internet, probably 20. And now this one is probably going to be 10, right? In terms of survivability, adaptability, and change. It's not going to be a slow change. And even though I think it's going to be, less, I don't know if it's 10 or 12, but it's not going to be 30 years like the mainframe, because Moore's law and Metcalfe's law continuously change, which has a huge impact on the organization structures that we're dealing with here. But I also believe we're several years into the third era now. So we're playing from behind. And I've thought about this third era of, 5G and, AI at the edge and robots and sensors. And it's not just the big AI, it's the AI throughout, right? It's the intelligence. But it's really like thinking of three different sports when you think about the organization structures and the way people do their work. In the first era, it was like baseball. It was pretty slow moving, very structured, 9 players, 9 functions. They got better. And if you had, with a little bit of teamwork, it worked, right? When we got into the football era of the internet, it was a faster game. There were more, offense, defense, specialty teams, faster, more muscular. And when some companies like a Sears or a Kodak came with their baseball uniforms on, they got crushed, right? They just couldn't make the leap into a new sport. Now we've got fairly muscular companies that are pretty good, the ones that survived all the Targets and Walmarts and everybody else. They're pretty muscular and they're used to playing a different sport, but the sport switched again. And hockey is much more of a fluid, dynamic sport, right? You've got to anticipate things that are going on. You've got to think differently. You've got to work differently. And, call it the Gretzky effect, call it whatever you want to call it. But the ability to have the instant response of the nervous system as the edge technology wants to feed the brain, it's got to go through a clogged up nervous system, right? Where we have hardening of the arteries, and that's not working very well. And to get to the brain. So when you look at agents, the big issue with agents is agentics is that the data is all over the place and the processes are all broken and everything else, right? So I think when you look at it through the lens of our models, people are starting to make progress with recognizing that they've got to blow up the legacy base and modernize it. So everybody that's been through us knows we believe deeply in that. You got to get the business engaged because it's a fabric of the business, not a separate department anymore, if you will. And we've got to be the integrators of all this stuff. So all of that is starting to happen. But what's struggling is the model that, will determine whether you win or lose, I think. And that's the organization model. And if you guys remember, the organization model is structure, leadership, culture, and workforce. And that is not easy to change. It's easy to change out servers and go to the cloud. It's not easy, but doable to build, digital nervous systems and get the data layer right and everything else. But if people start keep showing up with helmets and shoulder pads, and no skates to play hockey, we're not going to be in very good shape. So I know you guys, hear my stories. I try to figure out ways to explain this to people, but I think the topic for today is what's happening in the organization and what needs to be true in order to be successful as we move forward through the years, because I think the organization and the way people think is the long pole in the tent, including the business people, including if we could just get people to understand the future.
Well, as usual, Charlie's skating to the puck, right? So, and I think to just start talking about these realizations really about how organizations are operating. I thought I'd start with just a couple orienting slides. Again, most of alumni who've been around us for a while have seen versions of these these sorts of diagrams. But what we know is that for a digital transformation, for an organization that really wants to change the way they're operating to become thought leaders instead of order takers, right? We have to engage in a holistic set of thinking, right, across multiple dimensions to achieve these sorts of agilities that we describe in a slide like this one, right? And as a part of our work, we describe our own framework, right, the ICAP, in terms of these three dimensions of systems thinking, right, kind of cause effect, what are the physics, multi-year planning, the idea that sustainable change doesn't happen in an instant, right? You really have to have enough persistence and awareness to be able to drive change through multiple years of planning of financial allocations and commitments and work commitments. And then to do that, we really need to progressively elaborate the work. This isn't the day of waterfall thinking, right, where we plan everything up front and then we build our actions according to that plan. That plan needs to adapt and it needs to have depth that varies based on where we are, right? And so as we've been thinking through that, we've drawn a couple of observations over the last 4 or 5 years. And some of this material, actually, we started talking about in the time frame of DevOps and in the arrival of great thought leading books like Team of Teams, where the idea of the organization at rest, right? This is really the traditional organizational hierarchy that's focused on the words that Charlie used earlier: structure, leadership, culture, and workforce. The focus of that organization at rest is very structural, right? It provides care and feeding for the individuals within the organization. The organization chart doesn't change, so there's a kind of a known set of knowns for the people that operate within the organization. The cross connects tend to be functional, and this is really where traditionally we've put a lot of pressure on managers, right? So in that matrix view that we're showing, The idea of managers maintaining connections with other, participants in the organizational matrix can be a burden and burdensome. And those multi-point interactions as a result are kind of hard to sustain. But the focus of the organization at rest really should be on developing and communicating this idea of shared consciousness. What are the big things that we're trying to accomplish? How are we trying to accomplish those things? And what value are we providing to the business? And in doing that, part of what we do is we describe enabling constraints. What are the things that constrain us in the decision making over an increment of time, over a 1 year to 3 year period, let's say? And what are the guardrails? What are the must not exceed sorts of things that then we provide and governance that we provide to the organization that's in motion, right? So this view of the organization in motion is really the way work gets done in organizations today, right? So as we talk about the way that work gets done, then, right, what we know about this organization in motion is that it's dynamic, right? It's based on delivering value to the organization. Teams themselves are composed with the right skill sets that are required to deliver a unit of value or a set of capabilities to the organization. And part of the nature of team orientation is that teams can incorporate members from different parts of the organization depending on need, right? So rather than the work, the team moving to the work moves to the team. And the cross connects are the contributors that are bridging teams and sustained then by this broader sense of having an organizational network, of having a set of connections inside the organization. The focus on the organization in motion is really first on alignment, on doing the right thing, delivering business value. Then on capacity, do we have the right compositions to deliver the things that we need to deliver within the timeframes and constraints that we have to deliver? Then on flow, right? Reducing interrupts and time wasters that get in the way of people actually being productive in delivering value. And then feedback, which is really the closed part of the loop, which is all about the learning that we gain based on the time that we're spending doing various activities, right? There's something that I live in the Seattle area, down the street from my friends Microsoft and Amazon, and code is currency, right? We don't learn things until we actually ship things in production. And so that's a key capability of learning in terms of how we get work done. So what we believe then is that there's an imperative here that we need both, right? But we need both, but the current reality and what we're hearing today are things like this from the folks that we're working with, right? Collaboration overload and bottlenecks, right? Organizations for which you look at the calendar of someone's daily work and it's completely filled with activities from the time they show up until the time they leave, right? Excessive context switching, someone that's moving, desk shifting from one task to another to try to keep their commitments moving, information flooding, right? The joy of living in Teams or Slack or other productivity tools and all the things that hit us during the day that tend to defocus from either the work that we're doing or the meetings that we're having or what have you. And then having hidden expertise or knowledge. So we have people in our organization that could be very valuable to us if we just knew about the skill sets that they have, and a lot of times we miss that. Organizational fragility and single points of failure. How many times have we been held on a delivery because we've needed a specific expertise from a specific team to show up at a specific time? And then disconnected productivity and collaboration tools. Again, this constellation of tools that kind of orbit around the modern knowledge worker that are poorly integrated. They're either providing lots of information when it's not valuable, or providing lots of opportunities to task switch and multitask.
The thing that, as we talk about model alignment, as we switched the technology and business architecture to be more composite-based, more Lego block-based. There's tremendous leverage in that, but that requires participants from different functions to do anything. No one unit, because everybody's got to bring that puzzle piece to come up with a solution, right? Including infrastructure and network and security and compliance, but additionally, components from different applications make up a solution now. So it's not that the world has gone crazy, but the architecture changed from being long-running, project-based, where the teams were self-contained because the landing spot was a mainframe or a predictable big chunk of infrastructure, to now, in order to be agile, you've got to be componentized. You've got to be capability based. You've got to be able to put things together in different ways. And that has created, in a subtle way, this evolution of how organizations need to form project structures. So if I come in and I've got a project that's demanding on the company, and I need people from these other groups to be part of it, I don't have any view of what else they're working on, right? And they're getting pulled in every direction, so every team. So there's a reason for the physics, and it starts at the top of the food chain of business architecture, technical architecture. There's also an organization architecture that's got to align with that.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the thinking that we've been doing recently in this area, just to really kind of create that bridge between at rest and in motion. And I should mention that over the last several years now, in working with teams in developing agile practices and developing things like enterprise DevOps and implementing CI/CD and other sorts of practices, we've learned a few things about what we think are required conditions to really build the bridge between at rest and motion, right? And one of the first things is a focus on making team structures explicit. The number of organizations that I've been in that have said, yes, we have Scrum teams and we do agile practices, but can't actually describe how many teams they have, what the composition of the teams are, what kind of work they're performing, is an indicator that those are very tacit organizational structures, right? And we're not really taking full advantage of both the opportunity to align those teams as well as to ensure that we're delivering the right things at the right time. And so making these things explicit is really important. And explicit really is writing these down, right? Building kind of written charters and building a culture that allows the sharing of these different teams so that they can collaborate together and operate together. The second is providing a strong sense of enabling constraints, and these are really, again, the articulation of principles, boundaries, and guardrails. And any of you that have been involved in any of our transformational work know that we take a strong view in enterprise architecture, as an example, or just in general, our standing up of organizational and operating models in developing principles. What are the big rules that we're using to regulate the way that we perform certain activities or emphasize create certain priorities, for example, in our architectural goals and that sort of thing. Boundaries are really all about the team A does this, team B does that, and is really an insurance around eliminating duplication of effort and eliminating multiple ways of doing the same thing. And then guardrails are the cues that we give to teams so that they can be as efficient as possible and not have to task switch out of the daily work to go sort something out before they make a key decision. And so those are things that we've talked about for some time. This third area is something that's newer and something that I really wanted to introduce to this community. And that's the idea of making teams and organizational networks explicit. We've talked for a long time about defining the game changers. We're working with a client now where we're working with a really energized game-changing unit. And any of you that have been involved in the early stages of a transformation, and you're one of the key, thought leaders, change makers, it's an exciting time, right? But the game changers really are just one component of a broader set of connections between individuals that really is, we're learning, a key aspect of enabling change and transformation in the organization and enabling efficiencies in the way that we operate. So leadership really needs to be a part of the thinking about how we operationalize these kinds of capabilities, so that we can bring best effect, right? So that we can make the changes that we say we want to make. And when we engage in these kind of three building blocks, if you will, that's where we really think we can achieve flow, right? Get to efficiency and speed and seamless movement through various parts of planning to building to running. The key thing that I think is a differentiator, especially at the speed at which organizations are moving today, is understanding that this organizational network that we've been talking kind of tacitly about here is the conduit for change and transformation. And it's also the enabler for new ways of thinking about how we operationalize, how we organize and get work done. And we can build on capabilities of organizational networks to really affect positive change. We know, for example, that culture clusters, that behaviors group in local pockets with distinct priorities and need. This particular example is an organization with some geographical distribution, and you can see that there are distinct clustering of connections between individuals, and the lines between those dots really are the connections, the relationships between individuals in the organization. We also know that culture is contagious. As we start thinking about changing the culture of an organization, one of the key elements is communicating effectively across the organization the new sets of values and priorities. And we know that these beliefs and behaviors can flow through connections with up to 3 degrees of separation, right? So the idea of a leader positively infecting their team, that team then infecting others, is a key component of enabling change. And I really think of this as a way to overcome some of the barriers we've seen in achieving transformation. We've seen, for example, really great localized effect in organizations, but at times other parts of the organizations either resist change or not being aware of change. And so harnessing the organizational network is a key way of making that happen. And then we know that culture is caught and taught, and we know this from leadership principles, right? So the idea of showing up, of representing to the people who work for you and your peers, kind of the positive values associated that you're trying to project as a part of transformation is infectious, right? It can be caught and taught. And then culture spreads through informal relationships, through these connections, certainly faster than it spreads through the at-rest sort of functions. So the idea of thinking about culture as a way to quickly communicate, new standards, new capabilities, new values, is really important here. And understanding these patterns is really what enables targeted transformation approaches. So as I've been doing the work that I do with organizations, one of the things that I've become aware of is this practice of organizational network analysis and certain thinking around network forward organizations or network first organizations. And Hemerson, Paes, and I became connected through some of the community involvement of thinkers in this space. And Hemerson is a leader at Roche and enabling an adaptive teams network. I thought would be a good guest to have with us to kind of describe what this process is like, right? What does it mean to harness a network, and how do you operationalize that sort of thing? Hemerson, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you for the introduction and for inviting me to be part of the community call in the Feld Group. So then we can learn together what the organization of the future could become. So my mission is to remove barriers and build connections between people, organizations, and ideas by providing access to knowledge and information so that everyone reaches their full potential. And as JR mentioned, I help Roche, which is a large global pharmaceutical company headquartered in Europe, in Switzerland, but present in 89 countries, to set up the commercial operation based on adaptive teams network. So what I'm going to share a little bit, and I expect also that we have a dialogue so I can learn from your perspective as well, is how a commercial operation and what are the similarities between a commercial operation and then your organization on what refers to this organization in motion and at rest. And I would like to start then just by taking, I think the next slide, JR, make a connection to what you just explained about the organization in motion, right? So JR introduced the concept there, but the reality is the organization in motion already exists in every complex organization. Many studies have demonstrated that in these complex industries, and I think you probably operate in these industries, the members, individuals participate in more than one team. And the survey here, the result shows that, right? We have around 85% of the participants here, or at least the ones that respond to the survey, in more than 5 teams. We found very similar results when we did the survey on our commercial organization. Well, not only the survey, but the network analysis, where we saw that 1/3 of the employees were participating in 5 projects at the same time. Pretty much what Charlie mentioned in terms of this modularity. This is the reality. So the organization in motion exists. And moreover, 95% the participation in multiple teams could be from 56%, what we found on our survey, on what a little bit you show here in your own poll, to 95% in complex industries. And in the next slide, we go a little bit more in detail, because what the problem is that 83% of the workers or the employees do most of the work in teams. But happens that 75% of these teams are not officially recognized in the company directory, organizational chart, or even a structure of project portfolio. So pretty much what we see here also on the result of the poll, right? So majority shows here like 58% that between 50 and 89% of the teams are visible. In most organizations, this number is even lower, right? 75% are not visible at all. So now you have this organization in motion, where teams are members of multiple projects, individuals are members of multiple projects, but yet the projects and the teams are not visible in the organization. So then the question is what they are doing. So I think the visibility of what are their goals and objectives, it's very weak. So basically, the concept of the organizational chart is showing who is working what. It's a lie. We have to accept that this is not representative of the organization. We had the same realization. So instead of we trying to recreate what should be a new organization, is to embrace as well that this organization is already in motion, is already there. So if the organization is in motion, what we have to do, we have just to make it visible and then use mechanisms like JR introduced it to channel that energy of the organization in motion to be more effective and more productive. I want to share a video, I think, that shows a little bit briefly it shows what we can achieve or which kind of visualization manifests itself. I have other slides to show this, and which kind of results are created from the moment we make this organization in motion visible, and we use network as a way to organize the work rather than just as an instrument for management of change.
Remember, we started with a 5% cross-border collaboration hub and spoke model, without visibility about collaboration across the organization. We have now shifted to complete visibility about direct collaboration between 3,600 employees in 89 countries. In this chart, every dot is a person, and every connecting line represents collaboration in different projects. Boundary spanner experts like you are no longer hidden in the organizational chart. Because people can now find projects and who to contact, collaboration across borders increases by 10 times to 57% of all collaborative efforts. 1,100 self-managed teams organize themselves in 14 communities, collaborating shared opportunities beyond borders. We estimated financial impact of $527 million on combined revenue growth and productivity gains. Everyone knows who is working with whom and what, so they can reach out to learn faster about this.
Basically, with the right technology and the suitable enable constraints and the right organizational framework, we can do exactly that, to review the organization that's already in motion and channel that organization to higher results or to exponential results. In solving some of these simple problems like Charlie is mentioning, if people want to go to participate in a project, there is no visibility on who is doing what and what they're involved on. And it's exactly what we reach here. John, I see that you have a question.
I was definitely struck by the 500 plus million in value, and just not an exact detailed method, but just like, what's the approach to calculating that value, and how you made that case? Because I think this is amazing stuff to do. Sometimes it gets left aside because there's other things that have more tangible value, or something like, like a ROI and a business case of something else. And it's excellent if you can do something similar here. So just curious.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I will build on your question to explain this chart. We have the advantage to be working the commercial operation. So the teams that we are talking about are teams that are engaging with the end or market. So we can, many of the cases, trace back their work to financial impact or patient outcomes. And because those teams make their goals and objectives visible, so that's why we have a goal network, we can know what they are working on. And they made visible their progress, and they indicate how much they actually accomplish of it. So it becomes a simple math of adding up the value that they brought to the company, the results that they generate. And we also added there, John, savings that we created by using accelerating the fluidity of expertise and talents across the organization, which in the previous time we would make use of external consulting companies or contractors in markets that did not have that capability. Mm-hmm. So that was the most difficult piece, because we are adding a cost saving element there, but majority of that value is real results from the teams working in the field, introducing products, launching products, finding expansion of market access for the patients, creating solutions for financing for the medicines we provide. So they have a very concrete top line results. So even if we disregard the cost avoidance, mm-hmm. that those numbers will still hold.
Yeah. Okay. So and it sounds like maybe it's a little difficult to make the case to start this journey, but once you do, you can kind of, if you will, like instrument or set it up so that you have the measurements accumulating while you're making progress, and you're showing that. So it's, you're looking at the video, you were looking backwards over a period of time in the journey and saying, so far we have, because you were able to instrument things like that goals network and have teams kind of measure their performance and things like that, So you got to get some belief in somebody to get started, and then once you get started, you can start to show the progress, right?
Absolutely. That there is a leap of faith there in the beginning. But just by making the goals, but just having visibility about the composition of the teams, the skills and capabilities used to deliver that result, the description of the goal and objective, where we build is the goal network. We're able to map what the teams are doing, and we're able to identify the dependency between teams and the multiple team membership. Not only us, not only a group of people in a headquarters, but actually everyone is able to navigate that network. So like Charlie, I go for you, but it is one of the things. So if people say, I want to form a team to address that problem X, they can navigate the capabilities and skills that we have across the organization, not only in their country, but in 89 countries, and they can see where those individuals are working, which projects they are committed to already, and they can pull in those that have time, or they can time the project or the phases of the project from when the capability is made available. Sometimes not possible, but the visibility makes that much more likely. Charlie?
Yeah, the way I would like to think about it, and the way I've thought about it as I've gone into so many different organizations over the years, is my current state is an evolution of decades of, outsource this, offshore that, let's move IT, let's have, it's just is what it is based on whatever was going on 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, how I end up where I am. We have a notion in the future state, if you started with a blank sheet of paper, how would you design your organization, the right people with the right skills in the right locations, right? Because I think one of the reasons organizations get bloated and get into this kind of conundrum, you really can't work your way from where you are out unless you have a landing spot that's maybe 3 to 5 years out. You can't change these things over time, right? So that's one dimension of it. The second dimension of it, certain skills I want close to the business users, and they're all over the place too, right? So, thinking about designing a future state that's unconstrained would be the way I'd like to, and then use that as a reference point, as a North Star to start heading to where John was saying, start evolving to that. But you're proactively evolving to that, not just one idea at a time. Does that make any sense, Hemerson?
Yeah, I think it. What I hear you saying is design the organization with principles, so then the organization can evolve with time, and I think that makes total sense. The chart, for instance, the illustration we show collaboration between individuals. But those individuals are brought together into collaboration by one type of attractor, which is the goals. So the organization, and I think it's one of those principles, Charlie, that the leadership in the organization can play, and in our case has been fundamental on articulating these principles of malleability and exchange across the organization. And it's one of the most powerful levers to channel the energy of the organization in motion. The goals and OKRs and epics or sprint objectives are not new, right? But what is unique in the sense that we experimented and we tried all these flavors, I would tell you, is the understanding that there will be some strategic goals that will be defined by the organization, such as in our case, we know the portfolio of products that are upcoming the next 5 years. That's given. That's given by science. That's given by the demographics. That's given by the epidemics that we want to solve. The capabilities we have inside the organization in address some diseases. So, as you said, Charlie, there are some constraints that we have to operate on. But that overarching goals, objectives, they are high level enough so that every team in every country can then identify if they want to reach, if we want to launch the product X in 5 years in the future, I first need to understand my market. This is the case of one country, but others may say, oh, we already understand this market enough. We need to find ways to get access or to create revenue or create credit for this product so then patients can have access. Others can say we need to educate our the medical folks in our country because this product is too innovative for our market. So each region will have, or each country or each would have a different way to develop their middle term or their short term goals in preparation for that long arch strategic goal. And this is the beauty we understood, is that these goals, this goal network, they need to be defined in a way that is state ambition of value. Shouldn't be like a process only, or should be a report. They need to have different time horizons. So we have these long-term goals, short-term goals that need to be executed in 3 months, so the teams can learn and adapt. And you have the middle-term goals that need composition or contribution to several small short goals. And these goals are usually interdependent. They are not designed in silo or isolation. They know we realize that the problem is if we leave one area or one function or one country to design their own goals, they tend then to self-refer. When I work in portfolios for strategic projects, one of the main problems I saw is exactly this. Every therapeutic area where function were defining their own set of strategic goals with totally disregard on how they are dependent of other functions to achieve those goals.
Right.
And that's what we want with this structure of this approach, make transparent. So it does happen. Does happen that functions develop their own silos goals. It does happen that goals are self-referential, but that also becomes visible, totally transparent in the organization. So then the people have a chance to correct that because that's public, that's accessible. And then we also have certain intervals. That's very important to have these time horizons, establish a rhythm of review and adaptation of those goals, because many times, the example I gave, if a team say more objective is first to learn about a market, well, then once they learn, they need to move to the next objective, and they only can build the next objective if they accomplish the first one. Or they may have a middle term goal where they're going to design a launch of a market strategy to provide access to the product. And then they learn that actually it's not working. The market's not accepting that. So then they have to retrofit that information into the strategic goal as well, because that need to be reconsidered. The targets of market penetration need to be revised. And so there is this back and forwards and this adaptation of team. The goals at the team level and organizational level are critical to have this system functioning. But invariably, these goals is what inspire individuals to flow to those objectives, to say they have those capabilities, or they have ambition to learn new capabilities by contributing to a specific goal. Is not anymore teams formed around a functional structure. The individuals get much more motivated by knowing that they're delivering value, John, that they can measure in that. They can see how many patients got access to the product. They can see how much more revenue was created, or how much savings they are able to generate for the organization or for the healthcare system by the work they are doing. And this is a big incentive for individuals. People flock to those goals because it's attractive and motivational for them. So that's what makes a big difference on the structure of the goals network. So basically what you're seeing here, it's a snapshot of this dynamic part of the organization, where the red or the pink dots are goals and the blue are the team members. Again, because team members are working towards a goal, we can see the connection between individuals and goals. And even if individuals or team members are contributing to multiple different goals, we can capture that in any point in time. but also because these goals are described and textually, and the team members indicate whether they see some interdependence between their work and other teams' work. We actually can measure the interdependence of these goals, or therefore how interdependent are the teams, by basically three forces there where we call. One is the names are fancy because they are taken from proper academic literature, but fate control is no more than saying whatever I'm doing is 100% dependent on the team B. So the success of my work in the team A depends on, for instance, delivery of a code or approval of a request from team B, and there is nothing I can do if the team B doesn't do their part. Behavior control is when there is a strong interdependence and they need to jointly coordinate actions and synchronize activities between two different teams. So basically they attack on a big beast, and each one is working in one piece of it, but the end result requires them to work in synchronous and to deliver the final result, like a product launch when a group is working to educating the medical folks, but the other team is working to provide the healthcare system with get healthcare system authorization to launch that product. They both need work in tandem because you cannot overrun one, and we cannot provide different information for these two populations. So that is basically this type of information when they are made available and they are. And when we use the right technology to calculate, we can have a picture like this. And you can see in this picture as well, a little bit what Jerry explained. You can see in the left corner here, on the lower left corner of the slide, a group that is slightly separated from the middle. So basically, they are developing goals and working together. There is not much dependency on the rest of the organization. So this is one kind of picture that then the organization leaders in those parts of the organization can then channel the energy from those teams into more dependent goals, or they correct themselves in the next cycle. They understand, they see where they are, and they say, why we are not so connected to the rest of the organization. So they start asking questions and taking actions to adjust the description or the formulation of their own objectives in line with the rest of the organization. And since this is visible throughout the organization for everyone, these adjustments become easier to be carried on by the individuals themselves or by the functions that are operating in isolation. So today, most leaders manage this interdependence between teams via a gossipy network. Someone told them that a team Z is working country X and so and so. And then they intuitively make sense whether this is this a conflict of interest, that we are wasting resources there. In this setup, the full visibility, the full stated ambitions, the team members' composition replace all these gossip network by factual information that can be measured, assessed, properly acted on. Does not replace as well a little call and say what it means. I'm not understanding what you're doing. That happens still, right? But it's based on data. One other thing that you need to understand is in this setup, different from the hidden and ineffective organization in motion, is the intention. So all this is not happening by accident or by chance, or just this is kind of fostered, this is kind of steered by the principles that we in the guardrails, or what I prefer to call right here, enabling constraints that we have across the organization. But one of the things that it's very intentional and it's built all across the teams and also at the organizational level is the intentionality of building meaningful bridges across goals and teams in all levels of the organization. So the development of connectors or boundary spanners, so people that build bridges between different silos in the organization, is not left to chance. is conscious and intentional effort. So we have development programs for that, but also the best teams take that as the first action. So that we researched and we measured the high impact team, the most impactful teams based on the results they bring to the organization, and the number of external ties or relationships they took ownership from or they planned from early on. And we can see a correlation between that intentionality, the number of these external ties outside the team, and the results they bring. These external ties could be anything. Stakeholders, could be internal stakeholders, could be external stakeholders, could be people with knowledge or expertise, could be other teams that who they are dependent on or who they influence or they provide some input to generate the big result for the organization. So any traditional literature of management is going to tell you that the team manager is the one responsible for maintaining the external ties. But in these teams, it's not how it works. For a start, they don't have line managers. They are self-managed, so they self-assemble. There is a leader, we call a leader, is someone that saw opportunity and actually is making the effort to bring the team together, but he's not a line manager. And they share, that's what we found as well, they share that responsibility to leverage each one of the team members, to leverage their external ties, the social capital, in order to gain access to resources, knowledge, expertise, and information to help the team advance in their short-term or middle-term goals. So in other words, the most successful teams have a distribution of these external ties across team members, and they share that responsibility. It's natural that some team members have access to more important stakeholders or critical stakeholders for their goal or for their project, and of course they rise a little bit up in the social hierarchy of the team as a boundary spanner. But this is not a permanent role. It's contextual and it's emergent. It depends on the stage of the team, it depends on the goal that they have designed, and depends on the composition of the team members as well. So in the hidden and ineffective organization in motion that doesn't provide any visibility about what's happening, there is no intentionality. Usually this happens, boundary spanners or establishment of bridges across silos happens by chance, or when it happens is assigned to one single person that not necessarily has the highest social capital or has the trust of those people that they need reach. In this case, that's what they do. The teams already assess in the beginning, we need the partnership of this and this and that. Who here has the ears of that stakeholder? Who is here trusted by that group of people that we need reach out? And that's a regular practice. This is one first thing the teams does. So in conclusion, I hope that this gives a sense for after 4 years, gives a sense of what is possible to do once you reveal the organization in motion that already exists. And gives a sense that it requires intentional design, so it doesn't happen by chance. It's a little bit what Charlie said. You need to have the principles and understanding that you want to have that organization that is emergent, fluid, and adaptable. And this is an ongoing process of scaling and developing capabilities, because today, as Charlie presented in the beginning, there is a new technology, and how this technology does enable all these, or does it all these matter now that we have AI agents to do all the work? Do we still need people? So all these questions are still, they will always be coming. So it's a constant work. And I hope this was insightful. We open for conversation. And I'm very curious to learn from you what you see.
Hemerson leaves us with a powerful invitation to stay curious, to look closely at the systems around us, and to notice what we see in our organizations and teams. Thank you for joining us today. If this resonated, share the episode or send us a note. We love hearing how these ideas land across the Feld Group Institute community. We'll see you on the next one.